Well, the 1/10 of 1% solution that I came up with is actually based on this idea that only about 1% of the actual members of a community really make a community. And I got to that number looking at things like Wikipedia and online communities, where the number of contributors to Wikipedia is really less than 1/10 of 1%, or excuse me, less than 1% of the total numbers of users of Wikipedia. And I asked that question: how many people use Wikipedia? Almost everybody. How many people have ever made an entry? Very, very few. How many people have made multiple entries? Even fewer. So that 1/10 of 1% idea is based on the idea that it's actually a fairly small number of people who literally make the content that we consume as, as a city. And of course that's official actors, mayors, police, fire, administrators, and things like that. But there's also this other group of people who are making the stuff, the really interesting stuff, the stuff that I think people ultimately really love. That comes from a small number of people. And if you think about trying to increase that group, and I say increase that group by 1/10 of 1%. So if it's 1% of the population of Detroit, maybe that's a little over 7,000 people now. 1/10 of that, 1%, is 719 odd people. If you could add 719 of the right people, think of the extraordinary things that could happen if you added, a few more Tyree Guytons or Phil Cooleys or Claire Nelsons. Those people who make extraordinary things happen in their own neighborhoods. That's what I'm talking about, that secret sauce. Well, I don't think it supersedes it. I think I'd like it to add to that conversation. Of course you've got to fix the streets, of course you've got to fix the potholes and make sure your basic core services are at least, are intact. The problem becomes when we start reducing cities down to only that, and I fear that so much of our conversation, because budgets are so tight, that's where the direction is going, that's the only thing we seem to care about, and it's the only thing our politicians think is really important. That's not why we love cities. That's not why we stay in cities, because somebody fixes the potholes. We stay because of the great other things that can happen there. The little parks, the great views, the street festivals, the great food, the friendship, the camaraderie, the places to walk our dogs, and meet other people. It's those little things that tend to get cut because some people think, well, that's an extra, it's a nice to have. The thing is if people are enjoying themselves, if they feel good about themselves, their community, and their city, they'll forgive a few potholes. So I think the trick is to find that balance between, yes, let's fill the potholes, maybe we don't have to fill all of them today, but let's figure out a way to spend a little bit of money on art, on beauty, on community, on bringing people together and making them feel good, and I guarantee you the city will respond exponentially to that small amount of money that's going to be spent on that versus that same amount of money being spent on a pothole. Well, certainly part of it is the narrative. The narrative around Detroit, outside of Detroit, maybe even inside Detroit. You could probably answer that better than I could. But the narrative around Detroit has been about loss, about decay, and things like that. But I think that if people start realizing that there is a different narrative here, that there is activity happening, that Detroit is in some ways becoming sort of a new frontier for younger, energetic, entrepreneurial people who are looking to make a difference, I think that could be immensely attractive to people all over the world who are looking for an opportunity to come, and it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to move here, to buy a house, to buy a studio, to start a business. And you're in an environment where that is incredibly well received and welcomed. If that story starts to get out, I think that could be a huge game changer for the city of Detroit. Yeah, and I think it's actually the opportunity is not only for cities like Detroit, but really every city. Every city has people that love it, but we don't necessarily think about them as being a natural resource for the city. We think of them as, oh, that's Tom. He's here. Yeah, he always volunteers for that kind of stuff. He starts those kinds of things. Or that's Jane, and she just does that. It's like, well, no, those people are actually kind of rare, and they're very, very important. And we tend to, if we take them for granted, there's a good chance that they're going to lose energy, they're going to lose interest, or they're simply going to move to some other place. If your major business was about to move out of town, your city hall, your economic development folks would swoop into action and try to get them to stay with tax incentives and land deals and things like that. And they should. That's important. But what if some of your key people were about to leave? Would you be able to get them to stay in the same way? you can't do it unless you recognize them as that incredible resource. So every city has to maximize the people that love it and figure out a way to maybe increase that love and engagement, that emotional engagement. Because when you add the human heart to the equation, I know it sounds a little sappy, but there's something about our emotions and the way we get amped up about stuff like that. It's the reason why we respond to those great stories of achievement and things like that get us at the heart level. We want Detroit to win. We're rooting for Detroit, and Detroit is in many ways emblematic of America. If Detroit can rise again, it proves that we can still make things. It still proves that we are a country that can get things done. So I think that's why, in this sense, we're all Detroiters.